Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Talk of the Town podcast. If you have not already, make sure to hit that subscribe button, as we're now on the road to 400 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. If you love sports content, sports talk, anything from sports betting to updated rankings every week, it's all right here on the Talk of the Town podcast. And here today, we're actually going to be going over a good bit of things. I'm going to be giving some of my thoughts and predictions on the Jets versus Patriots game tonight on Thursday Night Football. What teams will be looking for a new quarterback in 2026? I have some teams that might be looking for a new quarterback and some teams that are guaranteed to be looking for a quarterback next year. And are the Broncos the worst 8-2 team of all time? And a lot more. So let's get right into it here in today's video. We're actually going to start off with the Jets versus Patriots Thursday Night Football game tonight. Look, Patriots at home on a short week, coming off of a pretty statement win against the Buccaneers. The talk of the season for the Patriots has been just their cupcake schedule. They've just beaten shit teams. They beat Buffalo at home, but that's only one game. It's a divisional game. They get all weird, which is one of my sayings. You know, I never fully trust divisional games. I don't care who it is. We see Buffalo and Miami last week. The beating Miami put on Buffalo. And you look at the rosters and how the season has gone, it's complete polar opposites. That game should have been, 30-13 or whatever the score was. It was a blowout. You look at it, it should have been nowhere close to that. But I always say divisional games get weird. And that's what some of the people were saying. Well, hey, it was a divisional game with Buffalo and New England. Look, they go out, they beat Tampa. Tampa was at home on a bye week against a Todd Bowles-led defense. So really, it was completely stacked against the Patriots last week in Tampa. And they go out, they play a really good game, make some big plays, and go ahead and end up beating the Bucs. So again, coming off of a statement win, they're at home on a short week this week in the rivalry uniforms, which again, I love those uniforms. They look really good. I love all the rivalry uniforms, the same ones in the NFC, the Seahawks, the Cardinals. I love all of them. They all look really good. I love Miami's too. I think Miami's to me look the best. And this coming from a Patriots fan, by the way. If you're new here, yes, I am a New England Patriots fan. But one of the things with the Jets and the way they've been winning games has been the run game. Breece Hall, Justin Fields' legs, it has had nothing to do with their passing attack. Their passing attack has been abysmal this season. It feels like Justin Fields struggles to get 100 yards passing and 15 completions because he does. He struggles to get to those numbers. And a lot of the things with Justin Fields is well, at least he doesn't turn the ball over. He had his first interception last week against Cleveland. He's only had one pick. Well, for when he takes a ton of sacks. And yes, his offensive line, this maybe isn't necessarily the best, but they've invested a lot of draft picks, a lot of draft capital into their offensive line. I don't really know if it's whether their offensive line is that bad or whether Justin Fields just, one of the things with them is can he really read the field well? Is he just that good of a passer? And quite frankly, he just isn't. You know, he has a massive arm. He makes a couple of really good throws every now and then, but that does not justify for the amount of sacks he takes. He holds on to the ball too long, and his receivers get all pissed off. You can see him on the sideline. I was like, dude, are you kidding me? I was like that in Chicago as well. People were like, well, they should have drafted Marvin Harrison and kept Justin Fields. Even though Caleb Williams, he's been getting a lot better. It was actually on my honorable mention this week for my quarterbacks. I have Caleb ranked at 11 so far. It's been getting a lot better as the weeks go on here. But, them keeping Fields was just a no-go. And the Steelers, everyone was like, well, why didn't they keep Fields? Fields was 3-0 or 3-1 when he started with Pittsburgh last year, and they ended up putting in Russell Wilson because Tomlin's seen it. Almost every organization sees it. That's why people were like, the Jets are nuts for signing this guy. 2 years, was it $30-40 million? Why would you do that? Fields is one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the NFL. Well, just one of the most athletic players in the NFL, period. Absolutely no doubt. I'm not taking that away from him. But in terms of playing the quarterback position with his arm, reading the field, really hitting his first read, being able to make a play and being the guy, Fields is just not even anywhere close to being that guy at all. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, there's a lot of talks should he get benched for Tyrod Taylor? And a lot of the fan base was behind it. He should be getting benched. And this is why I think tonight is a nightmare matchup, because without his legs, if you have to put the game in Justin Fields' hands with him passing the ball and making drives down the field on Gonzalez, Carlton Davis, or whoever he's going against on defense, not even just those two, but that's who he's going against tonight, it's over. The Jets literally cannot move the football because how they went against Cleveland last week, how they really went back-to-back games and have stayed in any of these games they've been in. Breece Hall explosive runs, and the running game with explosive runs in general, not even just Breece Hall, and Justin Fields using his legs, not the passing attack. And the Patriots defense, just last week against Tampa, I think it was against Tucker, actually, their backup running back in Tampa, they finally gave up their first 50-yard rusher of the season. And mind you, they went against Bijan Robinson, they went against Achane, they went against James Cook, they went against some pretty elite running backs, Ashton Genty. So this run defense is legit. And against Breece Hall, against Justin Fields, I mean, the game's most likely going to have to rely whether or not Justin Fields can pass the ball on Christian Gonzalez and Carlton Davis. And mind you, the Patriots are undefeated when Christian Gonzalez has played. They were 1-2 to start off the season, and their defense was nowhere near the same when Gonzalez wasn't in it. Well, now they're undefeated. That duo with Davis and Gonzalez has been great. The only issue I really have with their passing attack is their linebackers in coverage really aren't great. I know Spillane has a couple of interceptions, but really besides that, they kind of give up a lot of big plays in the middle of the field. They're just not really great in that department, but I think regardless, I don't care how bad your linebackers are in coverage, which they're not bad, but they're not great by any stretch. They kind of just feel a little worse than average. Justin Fields isn't going to be able to tear that apart. Now, maybe at 12 hours from now when it's 12 a.m. and the game's been done for a couple of hours, I'm going to look like a real idiot. I don't know. But, at the end of the day, I think the only thing the Jets really have riding for me here in this game is just the fact that divisional matchups get weird. They just do. And that's really the only thing I think the Jets have. Now, to be honest with you, the Jets defense has been getting better, even though they traded Quinnen Williams and Sauce Gardner a couple of weeks ago at the end of the trade deadline. Two of their best players on defense. Will McDonald, he had like 4 or 5 sacks last week against Cleveland. So it's kind of the breakout party for him. They drafted him in the first round a few years ago. So a lot of these young guys are going to have to step up here for New York. But I just think it's a little bit of a tall task. Again, short week, short rest. Patriots at home. A lot of momentum heading in the Patriots' favor right now. Even though there is some momentum with New York. I mean, coming off back-to-back wins and the first time in a long time for New York. I forget exactly when was the last time they had back-to-back wins, but I seen a graphic on it last week. I think it was before the Browns and Jets game, that it's been a while since the Jets have had back-to-back wins. So they're kind of riding high off that. Maybe Aaron Glenn kind of finally starting to gain a little bit of confidence. I feel like he was kind of struggling with that for a little bit. I mean, he was kind of being talked about as like one and done. Now, in my opinion, I didn't think they were going to fire Aaron Glenn. Even if they finished 1-16 this year, I don't think they'd do it anyway. He's a former player there, very good player for New York for a long time. I don't think they would have cut one and done with him. I think they would have probably ended up giving him at least another half a year next year to try and figure it out. I don't know what his contract is, but again, do you really feel like cutting? You just cut bait with Robert Saleh. Are you going to cut bait with Aaron Glenn after a year? Probably not. But at least he's got a couple of wins under his belt now. The Jets finally kind of getting some sort of momentum so far this season. Not saying that they're going to start, they're going to finish the season 8-9 and lose 2 more games or anything like that. But at least there's some sort of something for this season for the Jets. But again, I think the divisional matchup is really the only thing the Jets have going for them. I think their record against New England, over the last 10, 15, 20 years or so. And I know obviously majority of that was with the Brady years, but even out of the Brady years with Cam and Mac Jones and Zappy and whoever the hell has been back there for. There's been a lot of guys so far the last couple of years. They still have the Jets' number. I mean, even when the Jets are at home as well. So, yeah, I really feel New England in this game. I just think it's a nightmare matchup for the Jets tonight on Thursday Night Football. Yeah, Patriots riding high. Drake May, just been on a tear. Obviously, he's a favorite to win the MVP. Travion Henderson, I mean, Ramondre Stevenson's out. I think Keyshawn Booty's out again. They do have some injuries heading into this game, but these young guys, New England has a lot of depth. And I think that's kind of one of the things that has been underrated about this team is like, yeah, they can sustain some injuries because they just have depth. Travion Henderson, Terrell Jennings, who I think is playing tonight. I know he had end up coming out of the game last week against Tampa, but I think he is good. They do have the Ernest Johnson, who I haven't heard his name in like 3 years. But regardless, Travion Henderson, I think, is going to break off some big runs. The way they built the roster, the draft they had this year, their rookie class, is probably going to go down as one of the best in New England Patriots history. They have been fantastic. They killed it in the draft. Mike Vrabel's first draft as a head coach, obviously he's completely turned the culture around in New England as well. Just everything heading in the right direction for New England. It just feels like a nightmare matchup for the New York Jets tonight. I'm going to take the Patriots by 14 in this game. I'm going to say 28-14 Patriots tonight. Next thing I want to talk about here is what teams will be looking for new QBs in 2026. Let's get some of the maybes out of the way. Some teams that I think might be looking for a quarterback in 2026. First, on the Minnesota Vikings. Look, you spent a very high draft pick to get J.J. McCarthy. And we're a little over halfway through the season. If he can turn it around, he has, 8 weeks or so. They're 4-5. They're kind of just still out of the playoff hunt a little bit. If he can maybe kind of turn it up a little bit, this offense kind of finds their groove, including himself, then, they're obviously going to stick with J.J. McCarthy. They put a lot into it. They risked it. They moved off of Sam Darnold, which I know they're regretting. They risked a lot for this J.J. McCarthy pick. You moved off of Kirk Cousins. You moved off of Darnold. You used a high pick on him. You put a lot of faith in this guy. So if he can show any sort of a glimpse of hope heading forward here throughout the last 8 weeks or so in the season, I think they're definitely going to roll with McCarthy heading into the next season. Again, they spent a lot for this guy. But if this season ends out to be disappointing, they finish 6-11, 7-10, and miss the playoffs, it could be they might be in the quarterback market. They could be looking to trade McCarthy, whatever it is. Maybe they draft a quarterback. They take another chance drafting one. They go and sign one in the offseason, make a trade for Kyler Murray, whatever. I think this team could potentially be in the quarterback market depending on how these last 7, 8, 9 weeks go for the Vikings here. Next, maybe I have the Carolina Panthers. They could be looking for a quarterback. Now, they're 5-5. I think this loss to the Saints was pretty demoralizing. They could have been tied for first in the NFC South with Tampa. I mean, Tampa's only 6-3. Carolina hasn't had a bye yet. But Carolina would be 6-4. Tampa would be 6-3. And they're only a game back. They're 5-5. They're still sitting at 500. But that still sucks. And a lot of it is Bryce Young has won a lot of games for this team so far this year, and he has turned it around, but the inconsistencies with Bryce Young still kind of lingers a little bit. And these last couple of weeks has not been great for him. And actually, I mentioned on my podcast yesterday that one of the issues I have with Bryce, and it's a scary concern, is that he was compared to Drew Brees coming out of the draft a few years ago when he was drafted number 1 overall. It's just his height. Like Russell Wilson is 5'10". He's only an inch taller than Bryce Young. They're around the exact same height. But Bryce Young looks like a little kid out there on the football field, to be honest with you. But you would notice with guys like Russell Wilson, even Caleb Williams and Baker Mayfield, Caleb and Baker are only 6 foot tall. They're only an inch or two taller than Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson is 5'10" or something like that. But he's big, he's stocky, he moves well. Young is a very skinny frame. And I just think Carolina, do we want to pay this guy? The only thing that kind of makes it a little bit of a maybe is Carolina's just been a purgatory for quarterbacks. They had Baker, they had Darnold, guys that have thrived over the last couple of years or so. 2 that are in MVP talk so far is do we want to take a risk of what if Bryce goes somewhere else? What if he goes to Las Vegas or somewhere else and he thrives? It's do we want to take a chance? Obviously, I don't think you can justify paying Bryce Young $200 million or something like that. You just can't. Unless he goes on a playoff run this year or next year. If they end up keeping him next year, which I think they will, they have another year of keeping him. But you can't justify paying Bryce Young $200 million so far. But I think if they could get him to a team-friendly deal, which I think is really the best you could get to this point, then I think the Panthers are absolutely going to hold on to Bryce. But he doesn't have to be paid next year. I think they will end up keeping him, but depending on how the end of the season goes, that could heat up. Next team I have that is a maybe. The Saints. Look, you're stuck with Rattler and Shuck. Main reason I have them at maybe is because realistically, you look at them having Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck, it's yeah, they should be looking to draft a quarterback. But Tyler Shuck against Carolina last week looked really good. So this guy shows any sort of flashes of being this guy maybe could be our franchise quarterback. I think they end up keeping him. But again, we have a very small sample size with Tyler Shuck. So We just really have to see how these next weeks go. And that's why a lot of these teams I have in the maybe is like, these next 8 weeks are going to be the telltale for a lot of these quarterbacks and these teams heading forward. And that, like, should we keep this guy depending on the run we go on? Like, if Tyler Shaw plays like he did against Carolina, there's no doubt they're going to draft an lineman, a pass rusher. They're going to use that high pick they're most likely going to have on another position of need. Because the Saints do have some positions of need, obviously, besides QB. So we'll just have to see. We have a small sample size with Shaw. Next team I have is the Miami Dolphins. People are very mixed, and especially over the last couple of weeks. And again, they're coming off of a big-time win against Buffalo, who was seen as a Super Bowl contender, coming off of a win against Kansas City. Like, should we move off of Tua? The thing is with Tua, what's going to make it very hard to move off of him is just his contract. Like, if Tua wasn't on a massive contract, I think there'd be no doubt. Even, with the way he's playing, he's obviously regressed. He's just very, like, he regresses a lot of games, and he plays like how he did against Atlanta, against Buffalo. He had a very ugly interception at the beginning of that Buffalo game, though. He's had some horrible picks this year. And while the team isn't great, they're not really out there trying to win anything. They're trying to win, but, the whole Mike McDaniel situation and all, there's just nothing really heading in the right direction for Miami. But I think Tua's contract is the main thing that's going to keep him in Miami. But if maybe there could be a market for Tua. If they could end up getting some sort of draft capital back. I think they trade Tua on a heartbeat. Again, if they maybe go 4-4 over these next couple of weeks or next 8 weeks or so, I think they're definitely going to hold on to Tua. But for the most part, regardless, I think they're going to hold on to Tua because of the contract. But I guess we'll see here. Next, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers, mainly because whether or not they want to keep Aaron Rodgers, there's been talks about them wanting to do so. Now, I think like a lot of these QBs, pretty much every QB I mentioned is his last 8 weeks are going to be telltale. The Steelers don't even end up making the playoffs. I think Rodgers is just going to call it quits. But if they go on, they end up making it, win a game or two, or even if they just get there in general, depending on how they go out, is I think how Aaron Rodgers is, whether or not he's going to win to stay or play another year with Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh apparently wants to keep him, but it's all Aaron Rodgers' decision. So that's the main reason why they're in the maybes, because you don't know what the hell Aaron Rodgers is ever going to do. Regardless, even 5 years ago when there wasn't any talks about him retiring, you just never know. Aaron Rodgers is a wild card. And I have the Tennessee Titans. Again, a team I was kind of debating on throwing on here, but Cam Ward doesn't look great. I think they're going to keep him. Look, my opinion, I think they should keep him, but you never know. Tennessee is a train wreck right now. I think if they end up picking number 1 overall again, there's an interesting prospect. They're like, do we want to mess around with Cam Ward? Can we maybe get some back for him? Teams are going to be in the quarterback market. Do we just kind of want to take a chance on another guy with a new coach and just kind of move it along as we go? I think that is a possibility for the Tennessee Titans, because you've seen they moved off of Vrabel with no problem. Well, there's an issue. They've had issues since they moved off of Vrabel, but they had no issue moving off of Vrabel. They just didn't care. So it kind of makes me think, like, do they really care of moving off of Cam Ward, especially if they really see a prospect there they want to take a chance on that they think is probably going to be better than Cam Ward? I think the Titans would pull the trigger and move off. So, again, do I think they should keep Cam Ward to keep him for another season? My opinion, yes, but you never know with Tennessee. Tennessee's made a bunch of questionable moves, and I wouldn't be surprised they did it heading into next season. And then my guaranteed teams that I think are guaranteed to be drafting a quarterback, or at least trading or getting one in general, is the Las Vegas Raiders. Geno Smith has been terrible. I don't think there's much else to say. Geno is just a lot of interceptions, getting older. You want your team to get younger. They're they're a rebuilding team. You don't want to hold on to Geno with all his interceptions, and it's driving Pete Carroll crazy. So that's really a no-brainer there. The Raiders, whether or not they take a chance on trading for like Mac Jones, trading for Kyler Murray, maybe even like J.J. McCarthy, whoever, drafting a QB, which is overall what I think they're going to do. They're going to have a high pick, so I think they'll just draft one, get their guy. There's no doubt to me the Raiders are going to be getting a QB next year. The Browns, look, I don't think they're ever going to give Shedeur Sanders a chance, and whether or not he's even the franchise quarterback anyway, it's still up in the air. I think you're going to start hearing a lot of, like, Shedeur's just not going to want to be there anymore, and teams are going to, some teams are going to end up trading for him at some point. They're going to have a really high pick. They had 2 first-round picks next year. They have the one from Jacksonville, which is going to end up kind of probably being in 18th, 19th, 20th overall pick in the draft. It's not going to be the highest pick in the world, but They do have 2 first-round picks regardless, whether or not they use that to maybe trade for a QB. I don't know, Cleveland's not going to stick with Gabriel, and I don't think they're ever going to give Sanders a chance to be the starting QB. And I think they're going to blow it all up, and they're going to start with a new QB. So there's no doubt they're going to be at least drafting one or getting one next season. The Jets as well, I kind of mentioned a few minutes ago with Justin Fields. That whole thing isn't, they're obviously not going to make Tyrod Taylor the starter. Justin Fields, I know they gave him $40 million over 2 years. They're going to be drafting really high. Aaron Glenn's going to want a new QB. There's no chance. Justin Fields is seriously struggling out there. Jets are going to be getting a new QB next year. And then last, I have the Arizona Cardinals. Look, in terms of these teams I mentioned that need a QB or guaranteed to be getting a quarterback, the Cardinals and Kyler are in the best situation in terms of that. They have a very talented QB, but that whole thing's just unraveled. Apparently, Kyler could have played last week against Seattle, but they ended up putting him up on IR, and people were like, okay, maybe the injury's a little worse than it is. Then Jonathan Gannon apparently was saying, well, regardless, Jacoby Brissett was starting next week anyway, whether or not Kyler Murray was healthy or not. So they just figured put him on the IR and let him rest. He is going to be traded from the Arizona Cardinals, and they're going to get a new QB. So there's no doubt about that. That relationship is just fragmented. It's over in Arizona for Kyler Murray and the Cardinals. Next, I want to talk about, if we take away the numbers aspect of the MVP, which I know obviously you're not going to do that. No one's going to do that. But if we just took away pure stats, and I was like, who do you think is the most valuable player, regardless of record or anything to their team right now? Who would you take? And for me, there's no doubt I would take Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert's not going to win MVP. I think he is top 10 in MVP voting. And his statistics aren't as good as Stafford's, aren't really as good as May's. Like, he does have good stats. He already has more interceptions than he did than just last year in total. But you look at the situation between his tackles being out for the year, his running backs being out for a majority of the season so far. He's not going to have Alt. He's not going to have Slater, as I mentioned, for the rest of the year. I think Hampton's, I don't know if Hampton's came back yet, but he's definitely coming back soon. Harris is out for the year. But what they've dealt with injury-wise has been nothing just short of just terrible. I mean, it's not quite as bad as like San Francisco, but any team that misses both of their starting tackles, you just kind of figure their year's over. But Herbert hasn't really slowed down. Now, they had like that stretch where they lost like 3 games out of the 4 games. I mean, they were looking rough. They lost like 3 out of 4. But Herbert, they're 7-3. As if you look up, you got to think the Chargers are just done with all the injuries. You don't really hear them quite in the level as you heard them at the beginning of the season when they were 3-0. They beat all 3 of their divisional opponents. But you look up, they're 7-3 right now, and they're rolling. They're a couple games over Kansas City, and Kansas City, it's a tough assignment against Denver this week. Like, if you look and Kansas City ends up losing this game against Denver, you start worrying about whether or not the Chiefs are going to make the playoffs. Then being in the AFC West picture's over. Denver's going to be up 9 games, or they're going to have 9 wins. Kansas City's going to be like 5. That's wraps. But the Chargers are still in the West, or in the race for the AFC West. So even with all the injuries they've had, kind of just like, are the Chargers finished? You look up, they're 7-3 right now. I didn't rank them my top 10 teams. I think I had them ranked at like 9 or 8 so far. Or maybe they were like number 7 on my list. I can't remember exactly where they were at, but they were on the lower half. But you look at all the injuries. Like, besides like the 49ers and maybe some other situations, I don't really give the injury excuse that much, to be honest with you, unless you're missing your starting QB. Like, if Patrick Mahomes were to go out, if Josh Allen were to go out, if any team, like the 49ers with Brock Purdy, if you're missing your starting QB, I don't care who you are, you have the excuse. Like, having your backup quarterback in is just, it's nowhere near having the same as your starter. At least it shouldn't be. If it is, then you have a quarterback controversy. But, like the 49ers is one thing. And actually, I think there kind of is a QB controversy. Well, a lot of fans want to deny it. A lot of people say there's no QB controversy there. Mac Jones has filled that role pretty well with the team that has all the excuses in the world to play the injury card. Warner, Bosa, Kittle was out for most of the season. Ricky Pearsall's been out pretty much the whole season. You just look, I mean, Jawan Jennings has been dealing with injuries all year. I mean, he's been out for some weeks. He's came back and played with like broken ribs. These guys, this team's nowhere near healthy. And it's like, how many souls do they have to sacrifice to keep Christian McCaffrey healthy? I mean, seriously, like you look at it, it's like, damn, dude, these guys are just going down left and right on this 49ers team. So, that's really the one team I could just give all the injury excuses in the world to. Is like, it's only, you get to a point where it's like, you just can't overcome your injuries. But the Chargers, I would have to give Justin Herbert the MVP. Now, if you took away, hell, if you could give coaches MVP, I'd give Shanahan MVP. I'd give Harbaugh, Mike Vrabel. There's a lot of guys I'd consider. Shane Steichen. If you could throw coaches in there in the mix, but obviously, no coach is ever going to win MVP, of course, most valuable player. But I think Herbert is definitely up there. Now, there's a lot of other guys you could mention in there as well. You could even say, you throw away statistics, you could put in Mac Jones if you wanted to, for all I care. What he's done with that team and to fill in that role, and they're still 6-4 right now. They have a pretty cupcake schedule heading up so far. I think we could look up, and the 49ers are like 9-5, 10-4, maybe something like that. They're 6-4 right now. I think they're at least going to go 3-1 over their next 4 games. They have a pretty light schedule. So, if I had to pick a guy, though, I'd pick Herbert. The way he just hasn't taken a step back with all these injuries they've had. Quentin Johnson's been kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit with the injuries he's had. Luckily, the receiving core has kind of stayed healthy for the most part. Gadsden stepped up. They're one of their newer receivers. So I'd have to give it to Herbert, man. I think Herbert doesn't get enough credit for what he's been doing with the Chargers this year. And same thing with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh has just coached this team up so well. If it was Brandon Staley in this situation and Trey Lance had to step in, the Chargers would probably be one of the worst teams in the NFL. Seriously. That's how much of a difference those two make on that team. Herbert and Harbaugh both are at this team 7-3. I'd say they'd probably be 3-7, if that. If you had to switch them out for Staley and Trey Lance, I'd say they'd struggle to be 3-7. So it's incredible what those two are doing, especially Herbert out there on the field. He has all the excuses in the world, but is out there playing his ass off, and the Chargers are as well. Next thing I want to talk about here is Justin Jefferson's kind of season, and kind of, some of the seasons of his career so far are kind of being wasted with J.J. McCarthy. And let me just say, I'm going to word that a little better. This season, and maybe heading forward with the Vikings, if this McCarthy thing doesn't work out, is he just being wasted? And one of the reasons why I say this is, I seen him last week against the Ravens. There was an interception and just some balls that went up to him. He just gave up. Like, one of the balls got picked off, whether or not he could have made the tackle, and I think it was Humphrey or Malachi Starks, I ended up getting the pick. Whether or not it was one of them, or whoever, he didn't even end up trying to tackle. He just gave up. He just sat there and kind of threw his hands up and just stood there. There was no doubt Justin Jefferson gave up in that game, and he's a very calm, demeanored guy. He's an all-time talent. I mean, you look at the pace he's on pace to break, like, Jerry Rice's records. I mean, the pace he's on with, Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, especially when he was on Minnesota. He's not good anymore, but when he was on Minnesota, was a really good quarterback. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily call him, this guy isn't an elite-level QB, but he was a good quarterback. And the numbers he was putting up with Cousins, Sam Darnold, when he was there last year, was pretty incredible. I mean, it was. A lot of people even said last year, like, when Darnold had to step in, I was like, you shouldn't even take Jefferson in fantasy. Like, kind of give it up on that. And Darnold obviously ended up being an MVP-level quarterback last year, and even this year. So he's really turned his career around. But Jefferson with McCarthy is just being wasted. And that's one of the things is, like, when I mentioned McCarthy earlier in this video about, whether or not the Vikings do move on a quarterback next season or whatever the case is Jefferson is like, you're going to get a lot of the players trying to get pissed off, not just with himself and a J.J. McCarthy and the whole situation in general. And players are going to want out. It's going to get ugly in Minnesota. And that's why I'm like, it kind of worries me a little bit is I hope Justin Jefferson's prime years aren't going to be wasted with them dicking around with this experiment with McCarthy. If it doesn't work out, to this point, it's not working out at all. I know he just beat the Lions, a week or two ago, but he didn't really play well after the first quarter, to be honest with you. Aaron Jones had a hell of a game, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but it's just the truth. I'm going with it as how I see it and what's going on the field. And seeing that was a little bit alarming. For someone who is pretty motivated, especially in the Minnesota Vikings organization, he's brought them a lot of hope. He's brought them some all-time level play, and he's brought some seriously positive momentum in that organization. And you see him out there on the field last week. It was sad to see. So I'm worried a little bit. And part of me wonders, if the rest of the season, the last 8-9 weeks or so, doesn't go well, is Jefferson going to want out of Minnesota? Is he going to be like, screw this? Especially if you guys are talking about keeping this guy, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. So I kind of wonder about that a little bit. I think he's kind of in a spot right now to where it's like it potentially could be wasted, but hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully Minnesota does right by him. And whether or not we're going to see how the rest of the season goes, but he's an all-time level talent. And as I mentioned before, you have guys like Kirk Cousins throwing the ball. He doesn't necessarily need the best quarterback in the world throwing him the ball. That's the thing about him is he doesn't need Josh Allen or Pat Mahomes or Lamar Jackson or Drake May, Matt Stafford. He doesn't need them throwing him the ball to put up big numbers and be great. He just needs kind of mediocre play, and the Vikings aren't even getting that. They're just getting someone out there who's just slinging it all over the place, and honestly, it just feels the whole thing just feels like it's going in the wrong direction for Jefferson and the Vikings. So I hope it's not being wasted, but it's trending in that direction of his career could be getting wasted at Minnesota so far. I guess we'll see, but he could be winning out after this year. Next thing I want to talk about here is, are the Broncos the worst 8-2 team of all time? Because I've been seeing that going around kind of the sports media and stuff like that on TikTok, Instagram, even like ESPN. Does this team really just not very good? Even though they're 8-2, they have beaten some good teams, but how good is this team realistically? I don't think they're one of the worst 8-2 teams of all time. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any terrible 8-2 teams. I might maybe say one as of recently. I'd probably say that Pittsburgh 2020 team. They weren't even 8-2. They were 11-0. I don't know if you guys remember that team. Juju Smith-Schuster dancing all over teams' logos. He ends up getting his shit demolished against the Cincinnati Bengals. And I don't know if you guys remember that hit he took. He had that ball kind of flying in the air or whatever it was. It was just bad. I remember that. He was dancing on all the logos and all. I'd probably say that is one of the worst teams to start off, have a hot start like that as of recent memory. I'm sure there's a lot of teams like that are 8-2. It's like, how the hell is this team 8-2? I can't necessarily think of any off the top of my head, but I just think the Broncos offense is just very stagnant. It's just not very good. And I do think, and I said before the trade deadline, is I thought Denver should have tried making a trade for another receiver. Look, I don't think they could have ended up getting A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown was off the market, but whoever it was, I think they should have tried being a little more aggressive for a receiver at the deadline. I like Cortland Sutton. I like Troy Franklin, Mims, Evan Ingram. You kind of look around at the receiver room, it's actually not that bad, but they clearly need some sort of help in that department. Because Bo Nix, and I do, some of Sean Payton's play calling has been kind of questionable to me. I think Sean Payton should take a little more heat in terms of the offense. I think Bo Nix is taking a lot of heat right now, respectfully so. Nix's deep ball has just been he is one of the worst deep ball throwers in the NFL at the moment. He just is. He's not very good at it. When he uses his legs, that offense is a different team, but I don't know if it's Payton telling him it or Bo Nix just doesn't like using his legs. But when he's back there and he's just kind of in that statue mode, kind of how Stafford and Goff play, and those guys can't really move. That's the reason they play like that, is because they run like my dad out there, to be honest with you. No offense to my dad or anything, but he runs like me or you out there. What the hell is this guy doing? He can't, these guys can't keep up with professional athletes in terms of their running ability. But, Nix has good speed. Nix, he can't run like Lamar. He can't run like Allen or anything like that. But Bo Nix can run a little bit, and when he really uses his legs, that offense honestly is kind of a different animal. It's not necessarily a great level offense, but it definitely adds some sort of creativity, some versatility a little bit. They just do not have that out there at all when Bo Nix is out there just kind of standing still like a statue in the pocket. And he's he's a great thrower on that intermediate ball, that kind of 10 to 15-yard range, but it feels like they try to get a lot going in terms of kind of deep 30, 40, 50-yard balls down the field, and Nick just isn't great at that throw. He seems like he misses it a lot, and this offense stalls a lot, to be honest with you. They don't really get in plus side territory down the field. They just kind of stall out. It seems like a lot of 3-and-outs, or they get a first down and then go 3-and-out. So the only issue I have is no one has an issue with the Broncos defense. One of them is one of the fastest kind of violent hitting defenses in the league. Like their defense by Vance Joseph has just been incredible. Pat Surtain has been out for a couple of weeks. I think he's still out for a couple of more weeks, but they haven't really lost a beat, to be honest with you. Zach Allen's kind of now dealing with a little bit of a lingering injury. So if those guys start going down, then the Broncos are going to fall down with them, because that defense is picking up a lot of what that offense just isn't doing right now. They have the talent on offense to make it up, but, I mentioned with Bo Nix, is like Bo Nix's ceiling, we've seen it last year. Like, he is one of the older rookies, and he was one of the more experienced. He had a lot of college starts. He was extremely experienced coming out of the draft last year. So that's when people were like, well, now look, they got Bo Nix coming into his second year. I can't imagine what the ceiling is going to be for this offense. So I'm like, well, one of the concerns I have with Bo Nix is like, he had a lot of college starts, and he was the most pro-ready quarterback, supposedly, coming into the draft. I mean, the way Jane Daniels obviously played better than Nix last year, but he was the most pro-ready coming into the draft last year. That was the thing with him. Him and Penix both. They had a lot of college starts, older, more experienced. And I'm like, this guy doesn't really have the highest ceiling in the world. He just has kind of a high floor, to be honest with you. So we're kind of starting to see that with Nix now. It's like, I think a lot of people are disappointed because they were expecting that big jump, but I'm like, that's not going to be there. Like Williams and May and those guys were kind of seen as like kind of project, like these guys aren't going to come in and shock the world year one. Now, Caleb Williams was kind of like that. Like the Bears had Super Bowl kind of hopes last year, which was kind of crazy. But like May and stuff, they were definitely seen as project guys. Even kind of Jane Daniels, to an extent, was like, everyone knew he was very accurate, but it was like, this guy wasn't going to come in and lead into an NFC championship his first year. No one in the world would have guessed that. But Nix is like, yeah, we're kind of seeing it now. It's like the floor is really high, but the ceiling isn't high at all. He's just kind of middle of the road quarterback when at his best. So I think we're just kind of seeing that. The offense hasn't been great. I wouldn't say they're one of the worst 8-2 teams of all time, but as the weeks go by now, especially with that Raiders game last week, there is definitely some concern with this Denver Broncos team to me. 10-7. I know it's a divisional opponent, but damn, that was one of the, like, that win just couldn't have felt good. A win's a win, but like, it almost felt like a loss. That's how bad that win was. Like, just ugly. Like, there was nothing positive to really take out of that game. So, the Broncos, this is going to be a big game against the Chiefs this week. They need to win this game. If they want to win the AFC West and kind of take the Chiefs out of that mix of winning that division, this is their chance to do so and kind of flip the whole script around for them. So that's kind of what I think. I don't necessarily think they're one of the worst, but they could end up being one of the worst, maybe 1-2 seeds in NFL history if they keep playing like they are. And when I say that too, by the way, I don't necessarily mean like, well, they're one of the worst teams to ever do it. That's kind of like, in terms of teams that finish like 13-4, 12-5, 14-3, like you don't think of a team that's barely struggling to score 10 points on offense. You think of a team like Minnesota last year where their offense, you have Addison and Jefferson, Brian Flores defense. You got the Minnesota or the Detroit Lions, 15-2. They were 60 minutes away from maybe being 14-3 going against Minnesota. So you think of teams like that. You don't think of teams that are like, look at this offense, man. This offense is struggling to score double digits and barely put up like 14 points against the Jets a few weeks ago back in London. So I could see an argument for that there for sure. Next thing I want to talk about here is Pete Carroll and the Raiders. And was it a good idea for Pete Carroll to come back and coach the Raiders this year? One of the things with Pete Carroll, and should he have stayed retired, is like, I kind of think so, to be honest with you, because the Raiders just don't fit his timeline. And obviously it's going very ugly for them so far this season. One of the things with Pete Carroll was his last couple of years in Seattle was his scheme, outdated. Everything was just kind of getting outdated in Seattle. And you can see it now with Seattle. A couple of years in the Mike McDonald, they look fresh. They just look like a completely different team. They went from being like some old up piece of shit Toyota sitting in the lot somewhere to being a Ferrari. I mean, they are fast, they're moving, their offense looks sexy. Everything is going perfect for this team right now. Um, and a lot of that had to do to Pete Carroll. Just everything's kind of was moving like this, just very slow. Like, again, he's a defensive head coach. It just was running it like he was back with the Legion of Boom. And it's like, bro, like the league's different now. Your team, obviously, you don't have Sherman, you don't have Bobby Wagner, you don't have those guys in there anymore. So, and Pete Carroll, like you kind of look at the Raiders now. The Raiders they had a competitive game against the Jags, but you look at the game like against the Chiefs a few weeks ago, just really against some of these other teams, they just don't look competitive. Now, technically, they were competitive in that Broncos game last week, which is what I mentioned a few weeks ago, but that was a horrible game. While they were competitive in the score, they would have been competitive with just about anyone else in the league in that game. That was a terrible game. And why, like, he's with a rebuilding Raiders team that I think is going to be drafting a quarterback next year, almost 100%, drafting, trading, whatever. They're going to get a new quarterback. They're just not on the same timeline. Like, I think if Pete Carroll were to come back, he should have went to a team like, obviously that job wasn't up for grabs when he was there this year, but I think he should have been, if he wanted to come back and coach, he should have been a little more patient. Maybe the New York Giants job, where they have young guys, but, there's stability there. The Raiders have no stability at all. They have some sweet players. They drafted Genty. They have Brock Bowers, Max Crosby. Like, there are some sweet players there. But you look all around the roster, their offensive line needs a full-scale rebuild. They don't have any corners. Their secondary's a mess. They need line. But, like, you look around, this is a rebuild that's going to take a while. It may not take 10 years or whatever, but at least probably 2, 3, 4 seasons at least to really get this team back into like, okay, can this team at least be in the hunt for the playoffs? And I do understand, because myself included, I thought, the Raiders, they got Myers. They do have some sweet players, especially on this offense. Like, I think this team's going to be able to maybe pull out 7, 8, maybe 9 games. They're horrible. And I think a lot of us overlooked, including myself, overlooked all the holes on this roster. The offensive line isn't very good, which in terms doesn't lead Genty to get very many big runs. And Genty just isn't, I feel like he's improperly used in this offense. I think a lot of us feel that way. Their defense stinks. Besides Max Crosby, they just don't have anyone else to really produce. They have no playmakers on that defense at all, to be honest with you. So, and they did come off a pretty good defensive performance against the Broncos last week, but all season their whole team in general has just kind of been a mess. Gino's just thrown a ton of turnovers, and he's kind of, again, with Pete Carroll, like he's kind of like what he was doing in Seattle, trying to run it back like the Legion of Boom, kind of running the same scheme. Like he was trying to bring Gino back, kind of run it back a little bit, like his last couple of years in Seattle. And I was like, dude, like, move on. You are on a new team, kind of a rebuilding, kind of fresh team. It's like, why are you going to bring in Gino? I didn't like the Gino signing at all. Like, people were high on that Gino signing. I was not high on it. I just wasn't. I'm like, why? I thought Gino was one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the league the last couple of years, especially in Seattle. Like, yeah, he put up good numbers. He had over like 30 touchdowns one year. But it didn't contribute to winning football. It just didn't. I mean, I know last year they did have like a 9-8, 10-7, and they ended up missing the playoffs. But I don't know. I wasn't a huge fan of Gino. I just wasn't. I thought he was a decent player, but in terms of, being able, can we win playoff games with this guy? Like, is this guy going to be able to contribute to being a winning franchise? I just don't necessarily think so. And now, especially in the Raiders, with the Raiders, it's not necessarily just Gino, but he looks like he looked on the New York Jets like over 10 years ago. So, and like the Raiders too. He's the oldest coach in the league on a team that's had like 2 winning seasons over the last 20 years. This team clearly just doesn't fit their timeline. I don't know. I think the Pete Carroll hiring just is not very good for the Raiders. I don't know when they're going to end up moving off of it. I think he'll be the coach there next year, maybe in the next couple of years. But I think in terms of Carroll, if he wanted to win some games, again, you're the oldest coach in the league, dude. Like, if I were you, I'd be wanting to win Super Bowls. I'd be trying to win, 6 games, if that. I don't know. To me, it just doesn't really make any sense. So, I don't know. I don't really think Pete Carroll made the right decision going to the Raiders, to be honest with you. I just felt a little rushed. I don't know. I don't like it. It doesn't feel like a good fit there at all. Next thing I want to talk about here is, could the Bears potentially be NFC North champs? Right now they're tied with the Lions. The Lions are in first. I don't think no, the Bears haven't had a bye week yet, I don't think. Or have they had a bye week? I don't know. Hold on, let me look at the standings real quick. Actually, never mind. I have the scores pulled up, and my phone gets all weird when I go to look this shit up. It's annoying. But the Bears, the only thing that is the issue with them now is their schedule heading forward. They have a juggernaut of a schedule. I think their schedule here heading into the last few weeks or so it's pretty difficult. It's got to be one of the harder ones in the NFL. Now, what the Bears have done is that they've taken advantage of their weak part of their schedule. They lost to the Vikings in the first week by 3 points. They got smoked by the Lions in week 2. Beat the Cowboys, beat the Raiders, beat the Commanders, beat the Saints. They ended up getting beat pretty handily to the Ravens with Tyler Huntley. I mean, realistically, they probably should have ended up winning that game, even still with Tyler Huntley. They just didn't really look in that game. Had that miracle win against the Bengals, and then beat the Giants, came back and beat the Giants last week. So they have handled their business in terms of the easier part of their schedule. But now they have the Vikings again this Sunday. This Sunday, right? Yeah, this Sunday. They play the Steelers. They play the Eagles. They play the Packers. They play the Browns, which they probably should end up winning that game. They play the Packers, the 49ers, and the Lions. That's tough. That's why, there's some talks like, can the Lions potentially pull out a sneaky division win and pull off the NFC North, be NFC North champs? That schedule to me is going to be their downfall because they have struggled against some of the weaker teams in the league. Like, they have to play Detroit again for the last week. And Detroit, and to me, is just all around just better than Chicago, especially right now. And I just think for the rest of the season, their roster is just better than Chicago. I think it would just be a miracle if Chicago at least finished 500 in the stretch, which, they'd finish with 10 wins or something like that. So that could potentially just get them in the playoffs regardless. But in terms of them being NFC North champs, I don't see it happening. That schedule's way too tough. It is. And especially Green Bay, I don't necessarily think they're out of it. I know that they're struggling. These last couple of weeks, they struggled. But I do think they're going to manage to turn it around at some point, to be honest with you. I do. I do have faith that Green Bay will turn it around. Minnesota, even though, I'm not a big J.J. McCarthy believer, and I think things are heading in the wrong direction, they're going to be competitive regardless. They're going to probably still end up winning 7-8 games or something like that. They're 4-5 right now. I think they'll at least win 2 or 3 more games, maybe even 4 or so. They're going to be in the mix there. So I don't see the Bears winning the NFC North, to be honest with you. Now, in terms of maybe making a playoff push, if they can go 500, they're going to finish with like 10 wins. And I think they can manage to snag like a 7 seed or something like that, which is a massive win for the Bears. I think that's all they want, is just to get to the playoffs. They're not even expecting to win the NFC North. But meanwhile, we're heading into week 11. It's like, hey, we're tied with the Lions right now. We're coming off of a big win streak. It's like, hey, maybe there's a chance we can win the North. But you look at the schedule, and that's a lot. That's a lot to overcome there, especially with a team I still feel like is a season or 2 away from really like taking that next step into being legit. Like, I feel like, hey, we have Ben Johnson in our rookie year. If we can just snag the 7 seed, I think that's enough. And I think Bears fans would definitely happily take that. So that's where I feel like I could see the Bears season ending as like 10-7, snagging the 7 seed. We're probably a couple games short of winning the NFC North, but you look at our schedule, the last 8 games we had, that's an absolute win. I would definitely take that. And the last thing I want to talk about here today, here briefly, so what do the Cardinals do with Jonathan Gannon? I just kind of find it fascinating because you have the whole Kyler Murray situation, and he had that thing with, I think it was DeMarcado was it against the Colts, I think, where he dropped that touchdown. It wasn't against the Colts. I forget exactly who it was against, but where he dropped that touchdown like an inch before he got in the end zone and ended up not counting. He ended up like shoving him or some shit like that and ended up getting a pretty hefty fine. So, and they haven't really had any winning seasons with Jonathan Gannon. They've just been kind of stuck in mediocrity. Like, they haven't been terrible, but they haven't been good either. Like, they've just been kind of a little bit below mediocre. So it's like, do they want to reset? If they go to reset this thing with Kyler Murray, it's like, do you want to reset it with Jonathan Gannon as well? It's like, are we really going to stick with this guy? Or do we just kind of want to find someone else to kind of build a team up with at the same time? I think they should probably end up keeping Jonathan Gannon. look, their roster hasn't been great. They've just been kind of stuck in mediocrity, like I mentioned. That's kind of like their roster. Like the roster's not bad. It's just very mediocre. So, and I do think Gannon is just doing his best with what he has. And the Cardinals are just a strange franchise. They're never bad enough to just be, well, I guess they are. They had to pick number 1 to get Kyler Murray. They picked number 4 a few years ago to get Marvin Harrison Jr. So they're just kind of all over the place. I don't really know if getting a new coach is the answer. I just think the roster is kind of on the brink of being good, but like they're this close to being really bad. So it just all depends on what the ownership wants to do in the future. I think Jonathan Gannon's just doing the best with what he has, to be honest with you. I don't think he's a bad coach. I wouldn't classify him down there with like where Callahan was, and those guys are just bad head coaches. I wouldn't say Jonathan Gannon's a bad head coach. Is he a great head coach? I don't know. I think he's kind of where like Shane Steichen was with the Colts before, this year. The Colts are having a really good season, but the Colts have a lot better of a roster than the Cardinals do. And they actually played earlier this year. The Cardinals almost ended up beating the Colts with Jacoby Brissett. So I actually think they're kind of in that same realm of like Shane Steichen was just kind of stuck with in quarterback play. Like Anthony Richardson just wasn't really working out. You have an athletic freak like Kyler Murray's an athletic freak as well, but it's just not really working out. Like your roster and everything, the pieces just aren't fit quite as well. You have some sweet names on your roster, but when you look and you finally get a kind of a quarterback that can just stay consistent, Kyler Murray's incredibly inconsistent. You look up, he looks like he could be a top 10 quarterback one game, and then he's like a bottom 30 quarterback the next game. So it's just the inconsistencies have to go away, because look at Arizona and you look at the games they've lost besides the Seattle game last week. A lot of them are one-score games. Like this team could be a 1 or 2 loss team if they could just pull off these one-score wins. They really could. They're like on the brink of doing that. So I think they shouldn't fire Jonathan Gannon. I think he is a capable hire. I think he could be a really good head coach. I think they just have to give him a chance with, a legitimate team surrounding him as well. So that's my thoughts on it. But that's all I have for today's video, y'all. Tomorrow I'm going to be giving my predictions for Sunday. Giving the spreads, giving my predictions for who's going to win, who's going to lose, stuff like that for Sunday. So make sure to stay tuned for that. But that's all I got today, y'all. Take it easy, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.